Welcome to the Dynasty Pulse. Welcome to the Dynasty Pulse. I am bigz. Grindberg is with me. I got Coach down below. Chev too. Schultze. I thought I saw him a little bit earlier, rifling around in some drawers in the back. But I did hear that he might have been eaten by a cryptid out of North Carolina called the Beast of Bladenboro. So hopefully he's not in the stomach of some beast. We have a great show tonight. Another one. We're just every week is another banger. I know you guys come for the fantasy football analysis, but you stay for the innuendos. All right,
Euphemisms.
All right, we got a great guest from Destination Devi. You know and love him. He is Scott Connor. Let's bring him on. Scott, we're going to talk about rookies today. And producer, hit that button. All right, Scott Connor is with us, and I'm looking at my show notes, and it says that we're thrilled to have Scott Connor. That's true. That's very true. And then it says, quote, the mastermind behind DD Fantasy Football. Everybody loves Double D Fantasy Football. Let us know who you are, what you represent, all of that great stuff, and tell us about yourself.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. Should be a fun show. DD Fantasy Football, rebranded from Destination Devi. We've launched a new YouTube channel back in January. Tried to grow that, building out our website, ddfantasyfootball.com. Myself and Ray have kind of worked in tandem to get the site up to speed with a lot of the stuff that I'm passionate about from a dynasty perspective. It's not just players, it's not just trades, but it's things like roster constructions. It's things like game theory that really lead into a lot of the stuff and my approaches that we'll probably talk about later on in the show. But that's what we're doing, ddfantasyfootball.com. We have a great community, coaches in there. We're always kind of deep diving into things that are maybe not talked about on YouTube or on podcasts. So really it's just about the website, ddfantasyfootball.com. The tools that we have on there, the Trinity tool, which is the best tool for wide receiver usage out there. The War tool, which I'm really passionate about, is getting a revamp right now. Should be debuting here very, very soon. The new and improved War tool. And then I'm working on personally, myself and Shane Manila, we do Manic and Chill. We have our own solo shows on DD Fantasy Football. And I'm going to be launching a new War series coming up over the summer. So once we get past draft season, it'll be diving into War and how you can actually use it. That's been around for years.
Yeah.
But I still get questions about, well, how do I use this? What do I do? How does this actually translate to what do I do with my specific roster and my specific players? So that's where we're at. Check out the site. Join the community. You can jump in. There's a 50% code off in any of the videos that we do. Check it out for a month, and Coach can attest. Once you're in there, you probably don't want to leave because it's a great place to be. So I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, War is interesting. I was very familiar with War coming from the baseball side of things 20 years ago before I really started getting deep into fantasy football. And War kind of got outshined by VORP and a couple other new metrics that they keep coming up with new ones. Don't listen to former NFL players because they will scoff at your use of War, but it's absolutely with statistical analysis, as long as you can validate what you're doing with your results, you're going to be in good shape. Before we get into everything, I just want to remind everybody, like and subscribe, hit the bell, all that stuff. This is a premiere on Fantasy Sports Advice Network. It's going to be dropping later on the Undroppables, and even though that's a contradiction in terms, but this show is presented to you by Fast Draft. If you like drafting and you want to draft faster with Fast Draft. It's available at fastdraft.app in your Google or in your search bar. It's a lot of DFS and best ball stuff. The best ball origins game, it's all rookie drafts. It's going on right now. D-Up is IDP, all defensive players. That's up right now. And Flex 4 is 6 spots. Wide receiver, tight end, running back. Go ahead and get your best ball teams now, and then the DFS will start, of course, in season. Use code BOOTH, BOOTH, that's my last name, for a $50 first-time deposit match. Fast Draft, fastdraft.app. All right. You want to lead us off, Grindberg?
Yeah, okay. So we're going to get into our first section of the night, and we're diving into the ever-changing running back landscape and how it's shaking up our dynasty strategies. So each of us will ask Scott a tough question about a trade or investing in a player that they might like, or how to build a winning roster without selling your soul to the fantasy gods. So Scott's going to share his expert take on evaluating these running backs in the next section. But we're going to talk right now with Scott, and we're going to probe our expert right now.
Let's go.
All right, Chev, start us off tonight.
All right. I'm coming in hot. All right. We've interacted before. You actually gave me a good nugget on Twitter back during the season when Jermaine Burton breakout season was upon us around like week, 7 or 8 when T. Higgins was out. And then he was late or didn't show up. The game that he showed up in pajamas, what week was that? Was it week 4 or week 5?
Yeah, it was the game where basically the word was they were designing the game plan around him, and then he was late for practice and then showed up in the pajamas, and then he was inactive, and it was downhill from there. And I'm not sure there's going to be, I don't know if anybody saw the flooding around the stadium. I'm not sure there's going to be a hill for him to climb upwards. So it's kind of interesting. If you have him on your roster, I get a lot of questions like, what do you do with a guy like him? Maybe we can talk about that. But yeah. That was the unfortunate, terrible timing, probably changed the trajectory of his career.
Yeah. But so I wanted to thank you for that piece, that nugget of information, because I was like, look, guys, just get Jermaine Burton on your roster and redraft. It's a really good idea. But we're here to talk dynasty. We're here to talk some theory. So what are your thoughts as far as like when you have an age gap, like you have a guy like a Dylan Sampson who's very young, who had the college production, who, is likely going to be, in round earliest, late round 2, probably round 3, potentially round 4. Same thing with RJ Harvey. They have monster production in their profiles. So how do you weigh age into the process for running backs? And if you have them in the same tier, like for example, I have RJ as my RB8, I believe, in our FSN draft guide rankings, and I have Dylan Sampson 9. How would you weigh that age gap and the age difference in your process? And is it more of like you're going to wait, like you're going to have more in your portfolio of the younger guy, or is it just kind of you're going back to the actual talent evaluation? How does that weigh in your process? And, I want to know what your thought process is when it comes to guys that very similar talents, but obviously Dylan Sampson's 20. He'll be 21, I believe, during the season. And RJ Harvey's already 24 years old.
Well, I know this is Ask the Expert or Probe the Expert, I should say, right? But let me ask you this, Chev. Do you care about those things?
I care. Okay. But for me, it's if so. Like I said, I have RJ Harvey ahead, but if they both go to agnostic landing spots where it's not a clear path for either one, I would have to flip it and say, if I'm going to have to wait 2 years on a guy, or if I'm going to have to, my only clear path is to say, okay, if the incumbent gets injured for RJ Harvey, or if the incumbent gets injured for Dylan Sampson, then I would, then that's the path to success. Then I would have to go with the younger guy.
Yeah, the reason I asked you was because I do think there are still people out there that will look at things like that and say it makes this guy more desirable than this guy, regardless of all those other things. Now, my specific approach on this year's running back class, I think for most, and maybe some disagree, but I think for most, there's a tier of like 4 or 5 running backs that basically we're almost excluding from the class. Like we're already assuming that the top 4 or 5 running backs are going to be highly valued assets that people assume if they get those guys, they're playing, they're starting, regardless of where they land. Now, it'll be interesting if a couple of them land in spots where there's already another good running back or something like that. But if not, if just the top 5 running backs land in ambiguous spots, they're going to be elevated above everybody else. And then we have the everybody else. And historical data says about 6.5 running backs get drafted in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. So the first thing I want to kind of debunk is all of these podcasts out there saying, oh, this guy just needs to get day 2 capital. Your favorite running back's not going to go day 2, most likely, right? So you can't sell me this is an elite running back class and that all these running backs are great, but then look at historical averages and go, man, there's going to be 15 running backs. You listen to shows, there's 15 running backs going in the first 75 picks. And then what if that doesn't happen? So I'm just taking the approach of, I'm assuming everybody outside of the top 5, you could throw 6 through 20 in a hat, and I don't even care how you have them ranked right now. It's all going to come down to where do they land, who else is in the backfield, and then some of the stuff you talked about, Chev. Are there some tiebreakers I can find in profiles, in skill sets? There's going to be guys that land in backfields where maybe it's crowded, but the skill set that this guy has is different than what the other 2 backs there have.
Right.
Going to be another running back where they land in a spot and there's 2 guys that already do what that guy does. And you're going, man, I don't know. Like, he's going to have to beat out a similar archetype of player to even get on the field. Right. So I'm not even really concerned about like which I prefer, because a lot of that stuff's going to be taken care of, especially in a strong class. I expect most teams to draft a running back. I expect some teams to take 2, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they just all nuke the running backs that are already there. So I don't even really care about the rankings. But what I do care about is, okay, let's say there's, just vibe with me here. Let's say there's a tier of like 15 and 7 of those 15 are kind of going to get weeded out because maybe they fall, they go to places that are undesirable. But there's going to be that next tier of running backs where people are going to go, damn, that's RB 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, wherever they value in your rookie draft. How do I break ties with those guys? That's where the stuff like age comes in. That's where the stuff like one specific skill that people are attracted to is going to make me bump those players just a little bit higher. But to the age question, I don't look at running backs like if a guy's younger, he has more time to kind of not do anything. And then in 3 years, he'll be more likely to be relevant. That's really not how the running back position works. There's been guys that have come in at 20. Zach Evans was 20, not in the league anymore. There's also guys that have come in at 25 and they're still in the league at 30. Samaje Perine was an older running back. He's still around. You wouldn't have looked at his profile and said, man, give me that guy over a guy that's 3 years younger. So I don't even think age matters much unless you're really selling yourself that, hey, this guy needs to learn for 2 years. But the way I play running back in Dynasty, if you got to learn for 2 years, I'm pushing you way down relative to how other people are going to value anyway. So I just think it matters from like a sentiment standpoint. Like, how are other people going to view this player? Maybe there's a little more hopium in a guy that's younger. Maybe I have a little bit of a longer window. But I was talking about this earlier, and then I'll kick it back to you guys, about, let's say you draft a 6th round running back, right? Historically, that's not a great hit rate. But what are we chasing when you draft a 6th round running back? You're not chasing a 5-year career. You're chasing, is this guy going to give me some production over the first year, 2, or 3? If it's year 3 and that 20-year-old running back's not giving you any spot starts, he has no role, like he's out of the league. He's barely on a depth chart at that point. But if you're right on, let's say, a 6th round LaQuint Allen this year, he gets to the point where you're able to use him, that is a direct correlation to how the community is going to value him, right? They're not going to value him anything above what is his role. Is he getting work? Is he startable? Is he a guy on a depth chart where I maybe can start him down the stretch because he's getting 9 or 10 opportunities a game? Is directly correlated to his value at that point. If he's buried on a depth chart, nobody cares what his profile looked like at that point. So I think that's how I'd answer those questions. Like, I don't think the metrics or some of these specific things that matter for other positions matter at all for running backs because it's such a short window and the values bounce all around just strictly based on opportunity.
And I see that when you talk about running back 6 through 20, that sliding scale, who could get Braylon Allen where it's a younger prospect and they go to a spot where they get jammed behind a running back that is not desirable. So to your point, Scott, I like what you're saying. RB 6 through 20 can be a sliding scale. And I don't think as many people are thinking in that light. So many people are fixed to who's RB2 to RB5 post NFL draft. That'll shuffle things in, put in the top 5 solidified. 6 through 20, though, to your point, they're not really being considered malleable post NFL draft based on what could happen circumstantially. As you said, it could be a situation where they're behind a running back where it's redundant to the skill set. Or, like you said, and not many people are really thinking about this enough, there could be two backs who get brought in, and then what we think is a win in round 3 ends up being a, I don't know, LaQuint Allen in round 6, what's going to happen? Something that we need to see play out.
That's literally
I'll just add
the
this.
paradox.
Oh, sorry, Chev. I'll just add this. I put up a couple polls the other day on Twitter, and I thought they were really interesting. So if anybody wants to search, you can find them. I put hypothetical situations out there. Like, Chev, you like Dylan Sampson, right? If he goes round 2 to Philadelphia, but your RB 15 goes round 5 to Pittsburgh, and they say that's our starter, who would you draft higher?
I mean, obviously, yeah, we're going with the opportunity, most definitely.
Right. And it's funny because some people, depending on who the player was, they would go, oh, a round 2 Dylan Sampson, I don't care what team he lands on, I'm taking him. And then when I put a slightly lesser likable player into round 3, and then the more desirable name in round 6, people go, oh, give me the opportunity. So like those were stark differences in how people voted, because some of them, they were like, oh, draft capital over everything else. But there were probably, I did 6 polls, and I think 3 of them, the round 5 or 6 running back won the poll. Because people are just like, oh, the Bashal Tutin goes to Denver and he's the only running back they draft. Like, that's my RB6. I don't care where he's drafted. So that's where it becomes like, okay, what players are they? Because it's not going to go how you think. The NFL is going to draft guys higher than you think they should go, and guys you like are going to go lower, but you're going to find yourself talking yourself into landing spots based on the players you liked pre-draft and the players you didn't like pre-draft. So I just think it's an interesting exercise. Like, maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. But it's funny. People will behave certain ways when you apply certain names, and expect the unexpected in this year's class. Expect teams where you go, there's no way the Seahawks draft a running back. Oh, they took one in round 3. What were they thinking? But how do I treat that guy? But
right.
Who knows?
Scott, how do you take advantage of that psychology, that psychological effect?
Man, that's a deep question, because it does depend on your league, right? Like, you can vote a certain way on Twitter, but you guys know, just because somebody puts something on Twitter doesn't mean that's what they're actually doing in a league. Right. And it also doesn't mean that that's how your league flow is actually going to go. So I think paying attention to that stuff matters. For me, it's just, I'm interested in every running back. It's just different levels of how I'm building my running back room. So I'm not going to eliminate players off my board, but I'm also going to really pay attention to, like, what can I do with these picks before I make that selection? Because once I draft a round 5 LaQuint Allen on this team, there's not a lot of resale value with that. The resale value is if he's what I want him to be for my roster construction, that's the only way I'm going to be able to sell him for anything to anybody else if the outcome is what I'm hoping he is. So I'm not leaving myself a lot of flexibility there. There's very few like backup running backs where you can go, oh, I just sold that guy for a massive profit. Did you ever sell Zach Charbonnet for a massive profit? Tyler Algier for a massive profit? You're like, those guys were hits because they're on my roster and they gave me some production. But rarely do people act on the actually obtaining a profit for those types of players. So it's tough.
And I think when we're trying to like stick things in analytics buckets, especially something like age, Sumer Sports 2 years ago with the data up until 2023, age was the number one corollary to production for running backs in the NFL. But that data set is predominantly pre-COVID, pre-NIL. So those things are going to be changing, and we don't have enough information from 2022 to 2027. That's going to be the data set that we need to start looking at age again, because that has gone all kinds of sideways over the last couple of years. And traditionally, old heads are like, yeah, you want a young guy because they had an early breakout. The NFL is begging them to come in after their third year. And then you have guys that stick around. So last year, the top 2 running backs out of the rookie class were Bucky Irving, who was 21 years old, and Tyrone Tracy, who was 24. So, it can go either way, and we have to start parsing things a little bit differently than we used to. But that's why we watch your show, so that we can figure out what kinds of things to parse correctly so that we can get the edge. Grindberg, you got a question?
Yeah. Okay. So we ended up talking about like that back end 6 through 20 running backs. Well, I'm more interested in the top 5 right now, in your opinion on it. There's a bit of uncertainty outside of the top 2. It seems to be like a consensus 1-2 with, Genty and Hampton being 1-2, and 3 to 6 kind of is in flux right now. How are you approaching this tier in rookie drafts? Are you focusing on specific traits, landing spots, or are you leaning more on game theory based approach to differentiate between these players and maximize their value on your dynasty roster? Is there one guy you were looking at in that range, or is it just strictly based off of value at this stage?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think it's very league dependent in terms of like how is running back value actually defined in your specific league, because there's a lot of valuable running backs, but more often than not, their running back value is tied to like the extrinsic value that manager already has with that player on their team. It's not just like a true shelf value that you can put out there and say, this player is worth this. I found in a lot of my leagues that the current veteran running backs are already in the spots where they're going to value that player's spot on their roster more so than what somebody's willing to pay. So they're almost always willing to go, I'll just ride this out because what I'm getting offered doesn't replace what I have Derrick Henry on my team for. So I think this gives you an opportunity to give some options to people that are looking for running backs to fill those spots, but not have to pay the tax that you might ask for Saquon Barkley or Derrick Henry or even some of the older veteran producers that should go for, I don't know, a mid-second, but the person that has them goes, yeah, I was not incentivized to make that trade. So I think this, historically, if you're drafted in the top 50 or better at running back, like you typically get pretty good opportunity right away. And so that's probably where people are going to value those picks more for the player, the profile, but also the thought of, hey, I'm not drafting just a running back on a 53. I'm not drafting a 1 to 2 year starter. I'm drafting the next Saquon, the next McCaffrey, the next Mixon or James Conner, or the guy that's going to give me a true foundation piece, which is really hard to find given there's so many older running backs. So I'm kind of looking at this class like, if you want to make that bet, you probably have to pay up to get one of those guys. Just understand the bet you're making is a premium. Because if all I get from, let's say, Quinshon Judkins is RB5 off the board, RB4 or 5, whatever it might be, and he's drafted in the mid-second round, like he's either going to be incredible, but if he just lands in kind of that RB dead zone and that's just what he is, you probably can replace that production he gives you over the career that he gives you cheaper than paying up for the 106 rookie pick that he's going to cost you. So what do you do with that pick? You know what I mean? Like you kind of just got to figure out, do I have the roster that wants to just take that gamble, even if it's not a great bet? Because historically, I was looking at some running back war, and I know we got to move on to the next segment, but running backs drafted towards the back half of the first round typically are some of the worst bets, because the difference between the quote unquote like dead zone guys and just the random Bucky Irving or Tyrone Tracy or whoever those guys are, very minuscule over time. Like you can probably find a bunch of guys, Chase Brown, Kyron Williams, those types where you're like, yeah, those guys were never elite, but damn, they gave me RB10, RB8, RB12. So it's just a high threshold to hit if you're going to draft one of those guys really high.
That's such a sharp point, man. I go ahead, Big. Go ahead. I didn't want to jump out of turn. I have so much that I want to ask you because you're bringing the heat tonight, brother. Bigz, the floor is yours, brother.
I mean, that's a situation where I trade out if it's a startup. I try and trade back and accumulate capital. Depending on roster construction, obviously you're looking to do one of two things: either acquire all the assets that you can, or two, add production value to your roster and to your lineup. But if Judkins doesn't hit the comp that I have, then yeah, that's a dead pick. It's a wasted pick. And if you want my Derrick Henry, you got to be throwing in a Land Larson for me. I did it.
I
got it in there.
It just
man, we got company, man. You got to behave.
Chev, ask your question, man.
No, I mean, I love I love what you said there in, hey, it's not going to, if you're spending that capital, you're asking for a really high end outcome. Whereas if you take a guy like Chase Brown and he gives you a season like he just gave us, you won, right? And you only had to spend a rookie 3rd round pick on him, in some cases a late second, if you were sharp and said, okay, well, this guy has everything that we need. He just needs Joe Mixon to move on. And we were on the tail end of his contract and them having to pay all the, paying, Mars real estate to get Jamar Chase and T Higgins and Joe Burrow. So no, I really love that. I'm going to jump in after Big's question here, but I really thought that was a really sharp point, even though I do love Quinshon Judkins. And I acknowledge that we're trying to fit a camel through a keyhole with pigeonholing all these running backs in the day one RB1 status. And it just historically, even if they get the capital, you're still like, hey, there can only be 5 top 5 running backs. There can only be 12 top 12 running backs. So you're asking for an outlier outcome. And if we're pricing those guys that way already, it's just, you're not leaving yourself any room for error.
Yeah, but I think to your point, this is the season for outliers. We've talked about it before. From 6 to 25, those are all guys who show something that can put them on the field in the NFL. And I don't think we've ever seen anything like that. You know what I mean?
I agree. This is the 2017 class redo. I said earlier, the Aaron Jones paradox is exactly what Coach mentioned earlier. Like Jamal Williams goes in round 3, and then they take Aaron Jones in round 5, and you're just kind of like, well, I want Jamal Williams, and that proved to be a terrible decision, right? Like Aaron Jones is like I'm looking for those guys in my draft because. Like there's going to be, because of the fact that there's going to be a bunch of guys that fall. You just mentioned it. Like if you get a Chase Brown in the 5th round, he gets 5th round capital, but he goes to an awesome place. Like we're 1 year out from, okay, well, he's a 5th round pick. He had a horrible Senior Bowl, all blah, blah, blah. Whatever made him a 5th round pick made him a 5th round pick. And now we're coming off RB8 and he was RB5 in points per game from weeks 4 into week 16 or whatever it was. So I just thought that's a really sharp, really excellent point to allow yourself room for error. And you're taking home run swings on those guys. And a guy like Chase Brown's already paid off. LaQuint Allen, you mentioned, 20-year-old LaQuint Allen, by the way, just just throwing that out there. But this is a really, really like cleansing conversation in terms of getting some clean game theory out, and it's making me have to take a fine-tooth comb to my process. I don't like this Charles Chill FFB. I don't like what you're doing here. You're making me you're making me probe myself, and that's not what I came here for.
Probe yourself.
Scientific. You got to be scientific.
It's scientific.
All right. We're going to cut out the last segment because this one is fire. So we got 2 more questions for you, Scott, and Biggs has got the floor.
So I'm a recent convert to the idea of don't be afraid to win in year 1 and then adjust afterwards. When I first started playing a lot of Dynasty, it was basically who are the young guys that I'm going to be looking at in 4 or 5 years that I'm going to be focused on in my startup draft. I lost enough doing that now I don't hesitate to take veterans or guys that I'm higher on than a rookie or a young guy. I also advocate for strategies that carry over from redraft, like waiting as long as I can on quarterback if you have a back half 1st round slot, taking tight ends late, sometimes going with a 0 RB build. So I have 2 questions. Number 1, when you go into your startup draft, how adaptable are you depending on your draft slot with how you're going to construct your roster? And are there any specific team building concepts that you tend to stick to even when you try not to?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack in that. I think the first thing I would say is that when you are looking at because every off season is different. I've been playing Dynasty since 2013, and so I've seen a lot of off seasons. I've seen a lot of trends where I'm like, man, in 2020 and 2021, this was the way to play. And then in 2022, I'm like, okay, I've shifted. And then maybe I'm playing a little differently in 2024 and 2025. And a lot of times you sit back and you find yourself, you're just reacting to what previously happened the last year or two. That's it. Now, when that is challenging historical data, one thing I'll just throw out there for the listeners, if you go back, and I've studied the war for almost 20 years, historically, the one thing that really doesn't change is the way that it looks as like a season of production at all positions. The chart looks very similar from year to year. Like from week 1 to week 17, cumulatively production, even if you look at it from a point per game standpoint, but just total in the season, the distribution of production looks very similar from year to year. So like literally the amount of fantasy points, how they're distributed by position, you'd be shocked at how close the percentages are from season to season. Like you'll hear, you guys probably heard last year how running backs were more productive last year than in 2023, right? Yet the difference was they contributed like less than 0.5% more points last year than the year before. But yet one year was like, oh, it was a great 0 RB year, and the other year it was a running back heavy season. So when I'm looking at startups, like right now, historically, if you just look at that data, it really does lend towards the way the quarterback landscape is set up right now. There's just not a lot of reason to pay for I call them like the dead zone of quarterbacks. It's probably not a great term because we use that for running backs, but just QB 8 through 20. And it's probably like this year's running back class. I can tell you, who do you value higher, like Dak Prescott or Brock Purdy or Jared Goff or Baker Mayfield or Jordan Love, right? I mean, there's literally 15 of those QBs. But if you notice, like there's not a lot of difference when you have one and your league mate has another. Unless you just like one over the other, there's not a lot of movement that happens between. You don't go to somebody and go, hey, I'll give you Trevor Lawrence and you give me Dak. But you have to tack on 2 seconds. Like immediately the response is, you know what? I don't really care between the two. I'll just use my seconds in a different way. But then you look at that zone of quarterbacks and you go, okay, if I'm on the bottom tail of that QB 8 through 20, what did I actually get? And the reality is if you end up with, let's just say Tua's healthy next year and let me ask you this, Coach, where does Tua finish if he's healthy? QB what? Points per game. Not the number of points per game, just ranked QB wise. Where is he at? QB what?
15.
I think that would be his best finish that he's had playing a full season. Now he hasn't played a lot of full seasons, but let's just say he's QB 17. Is that fair? Fair outcome for Tua?
Stroud,
the reality is that is about like 3 to 5% above what I could get if I had access to the weekly Cooper Rush, Mason Rudolph, Andy Dalton. Now, the key in Dynasty is I don't have all of those guys, but assuming I have a way to get those guys every week, why would I pay a 4th-round startup pick for Tua when there's a mechanism where if I'm just taking the median range of outcomes for a guy like that I can replace for nothing? And a lot of times in leagues, you can get those guys off waivers, or you can collect them now if you give yourself the roster capacity. So I think that's probably the blind spot, because what are you paying if you draft Trevor Lawrence in a startup who's never finished above QB 12? You're paying for just convenience, right? I don't have to change him out for a couple more years because he's got a contract and he's got job security. I can just park him over there and not have to worry about it. But then you look back and you go, what did I actually get from that spot? And it was so little above what I could have just dumpster dove for free that it starts maybe changing how you view those startup picks. So I think it's not 0 QB, but it's kind of like, especially if I'm picking in the top 3 or 4 and I get myself Lamar Jackson, as long as I structure my roster right, I can literally go into the season with not a second quarterback. I just need to have one opening day. Maybe I find this year's version of Russell Wilson or Gardner Minshew. That guy's going to die midway through the season. He's going to lose his job. And I know I'm going to have to replace it. But man, what did I pay to get that on my roster? And the culmination is so cheap relative to paying the 109 for the security of Dak Prescott just kind of feels like, again, if you're not on the high end of this QB range, you end up paying for just this mythical security that really doesn't exist because you're not buying any insulation. If T-Law's QB 16, guess what nobody wants to do in the offseason? Buy him next year. Ah, man, he's just QB 16. He's just a guy, Like, there isn't an expanded market. So that'd be my advice.
QB 5 and nobody wanted to buy him the next year.
And that's what you're hoping for, right? If you invest in one of those guys, you're hoping they hit the higher range of outcomes. But again, there's like 15 QBs in that tier. Not all of them are going to be QB 8, QB 7. One of them's going to have to be QB 17. So.
Well, last year, CJ Stroud's price was absolutely inflated on Underdog.
There you go.
And now he regresses back. So what did you gain to your point, Scott? You didn't really shave off anything plus. And I really love how you're talking dirty to us about the any quarterback on a 53 strategy. I love how you weave that in. I'm a huge proponent of the any running back on a 53 as per your influence. But the beautiful thing, I really love how you've taken on, especially in the dynasty market, in the landscape, the concept of any QB on a 53. So I can remember being in the hospital for my second kid being born, picking up Joe Flacco at 3 a.m. in the morning.
To your second kid?
Yeah, what?
You gave birth to your second kid?
Yeah, I got pregnant, believe it or not, in 2025.
We have breaking news, folks.
Where we're at, yeah. So, sorry, the phrasing's off, but the point remains. I remember picking him up, and you get certain value. Same thing with last year, Mac Jones. He got you a couple affordable starts. So I like the utility element that you bring strategy-wise to quarterbacks. And to your point, there's a lot more malleability than people may think once you get past those core top-tier quarterbacks.
Oh, let me just add this point real quick. If you build your roster, and this is an example in a startup, let's say you draft a quarterback in the top 6. You draft Joe Burrow. That's fine. He's fine as your QB1, right?
Mm-hmm.
What happens if you then spend your 4th-round startup pick on Dak Prescott? You are locked in. Dak Prescott is going to be your starter. Your bias every week is going to start him. The thought of throwing in Cooper Rush over Trevor Lawrence is never going to cross your mind. Even if you kind of look at it and you go, consensus ranks has Cooper Rush at quarterback 22 and T-Law at quarterback 19. There's not that big of a gap. But because you've constructed your roster, I see so many rosters where they go, what should I do with this team? And it's like they have the any quarterback on a 2-deep strategy. They're holding all these backups, right?
Yep.
But then they have Joe Burrow, Dak Prescott, and Geno Smith. And I'm like, they're actually blocking the effectiveness of the strategy because you're never going to use Mason Rudolph. You're never going to throw Mac Jones in because they're blocked by somebody that really doesn't have that big of a difference range of outcomes wise. Like Coach, where's CJ Stroud going on Underdog right now? Do you know what QB he's going off at?
It's got to be QB 17.
Okay. Do you even feel super confident at QB 17 that he is going to smash his expectation? You know what I mean?
Not at all. And it's funny, last year, Stroud's, he was going, QB 5, QB 6.
QB 5, 6.
And then regress. We could have that sliding scale. Believe it or not, it could happen. People don't want to say it right now because there's hindsight bias, vividness bias, recency. Joe Burrow could absolutely slide back. We don't love it. It sounds blasphemous now, but where was Joe Burrow's ADP the prior year? Round 9, round 10, and then he's escalated up. Now you're paying, the price of the brick went up. You're paying max price where there's a lot less leverage and room for Burrow to show error. And for a guy who primarily passes, and it's not the rushing element, there can absolutely be that sliding scale, just like Matthew Stafford. And another thing to your point, it bleeds down. This happened for me with Daniel Jones. He was my second quarterback. I got burned by him. I had Jalen Hurts, and I thought, man, I'm set up. This was after the electric, I think, 2022 season for Daniel Jones. I was going into 2023 happy with Hurts and Jones. And then Jones ended up, what did he get? He got benched or he got hurt, whatever it was. He lost his job. And then I was just
he tore his ACL.
That's what it was. I was chasing quarterbacks. That's actually what got me to the Joe Flacco pickup. So to your point, once one is out of the way, it makes it easier to just flood any quarterback, accordion out, and flood your roster with those backup quarterbacks to fit that second quarterback spot. Whereas to your point, if it's Trevor Lawrence is in there, he's blocking every single time, and that strategy is not effective.
With all these names being thrown around, I do want to shout out NorCal and Folsom High School Bulldogs legend, Jake Browning. Mike, what do you got?
Chev, do you have anything to say about that?
No, I was looking at, so interestingly enough, I was in a group chat and we were discussing the value of Jordan Love in particular. And my thing was like, hey man, I got offered a trade, and the trade was the 103 and the 205 for Jordan Love. And I wanted to, one, the 103 could be Cam Ward. I'm a Titans fan. You can see the jersey behind me. I'm a big Titans fan, so I wanted that, but it's not guaranteed that it could be Jordan Love. And he's going off at like QB 12 in some mock draft ADP that I've cooked up, over 40, like 20 or 30 drafts. So it's like consistently around QB 12. So I was like, man, I feel like, and the guy needed a QB. So I feel like I could squeeze more value out of him, knowing that Jordan Love, hey, QB1 with quote unquote a QB5 ceiling, even though on any given year where all the quarterbacks are healthy, he's more like between QB9 and QB14. Like, he's a pocket passer. The same thing you said about Joe Burrow, with just a little bit less high. Well, not nearly as high of a ceiling. Like, we're going to cap out at 4,100 yards and 30 touchdowns, that'll get you like QB8, QB9, right? With minimal rushing production. I think he rushed for 83 yards this year. Injuries, blah, blah, blah. So I was saying, like, okay, if he's at QB 12, and I view his ceiling as QB 10 probably in points per game, I'm getting close to the value, but I feel like I could squeeze more just because that guy needed a quarterback. So, but there was like an argument that no, his ceiling's QB 5, and I'm like, no, he's not. That's not where Jordan Love should be valued. Like, there's no way. If I ever get to QB 5 value for Jordan Love, or he gives me a QB 5 season in points per game, I got to get him off I got to maximize that sell window and get him off my roster immediately. But he's in QB Purgatory. I know you were struggling for the term to come, like, not the QB dead zone, it's QB Purgatory, where those guys aren't necessarily they're not going to week in, week out be a difference maker that can win you your week more than like 3 or 4 weeks out of a 17 game season or 17 week season for fantasy. So I absolutely love that point you just made. It makes me feel like I actually know ball. Like, I call myself the legendary ball knower. And then when I have somebody as sharp as Scott Connor come on here and say some things that I've been saying, I said earlier in the day, I'm just like, all right, okay, all right.
Well, let me ask you this, Chev. Who's your QB1 on that team? Was it Jordan Love, or did you have another like comparable QB? Do you remember? My
QB1, well, it's the same because I have Dak and I have Jordan Love.
Okay. So let's think about it this way. Let's assume that you're willing to make the bet that Dak can hit the higher range of his outcomes. Maybe that's QB 6, 7, 8, like top 10, not top 5, but top 10, right?
Right.
So I think a lot of people struggle with 103 or Jordan Love because they immediately go, well, I need a quarterback. Yes. I don't like the quarterback options at 103. So let me de-risk myself and just take Jordan Love instead of drafting Cam Ward, because Cam Ward is unknown. But if you just said, okay, without knowing if Cam Ward busts or not, you'd probably say he falls right into the same range as Jordan Love in terms of like his range of outcomes year to year. Yep. But the beauty of it, if I told you this, that let's just say you had a tier higher QB on the roster, and this is speaking to anybody that has Lamar, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels. If you have that guy, look at your QB2. If someone's willing to give you the 103 and the 205 for your Jordan Love, who's your QB2,
yeah,
really the only decision you have to then make is, do I have access to just get that replacement level QB production anytime I need it. And that takes a little more work. Like you do have to roster construct by, you have to hold some of those backups. You might have to go get a temporary Mac Jones or a temporary Russell Wilson or someone like that. But if I told you every week of the season, all you had to do is just go up to the corner store and you could pay a quarter and you just get quarterback 20 production and you just lock it in your lineup, you would do that rather than pay $500 for something that you just have there every single week, which is Jordan Love, right? But people go, that's not my dynasty market. And so there's some work that has to be put in to get that quarterback 20 production. Maybe you have to go buy a spot starter. Maybe you have to pay a third. Maybe you have to roster some extra QBs. But if Jordan Love's QB 12 and you have free access to just buy replacement level production at quarterback 2 when your quarterback 1 is Jaden Daniels, like, dude, think about what that roster looks like if you draft Travion Henderson and he's giving you 19 points a game in your RB2 spot. Like, you smash that trade because the difference between what you got and what you're replacing, assuming you can get the replacement level production very cheap. It's like, that's how you have to think about the quarterback position. That's how I'm thinking about it in a startup. So I'm leaning towards just not investing in those guys that are in that purgatory. And thank you for correcting me on purgatory versus dead zone. That's much better.
And when you say that, that's when you're in the back end of the draft, because obviously if you're in a super flex startup and you have a top 4 pick, it's going to be one of Lamar, Allen, Jaden Daniels. Is that safe to say?
And make your bets, because you can bet that it could be Burrow. You can bet that it could be Mahomes. You know, like, you just have to make the bet. I'm not opposed to saying I can squint and see Pat Mahomes having a top 5 season again, but just acknowledge that's the bet you're making and build your roster around it. Like, the one thing we forget about dynasty leagues, especially, you only make money if you're in the first or second spot of the league. So why do all the other decisions we make typically are out of fear? Oh man, I want to trade the 103 and 205 for Jordan Love because I'm fearful that Cam Ward busts. Right? We make a lot of decisions just trying to de-risk ourselves of negative outcomes, but then we'll also tell ourselves, oh, I don't want to finish in the middle. But all the decisions you make are kind of leading towards hedging your bets or just finishing so that you're slightly above average, which doesn't win. So,
yeah, totally.
This is, goodness gracious, that I'm about to get the collection plate out, son. That was beautiful.
Well, it was great because, like, I'm a guy that in Dynasty, I approach it with a lot of, I like my quarterback heavy. I don't have to worry about that position, especially if I got 2 guys that are performing really, really high. You make me think secondary now about, trading off an asset, especially if I got a Josh Allen that is really carrying it. I don't really need to have that secondary, and I can upgrade a couple other pieces. I'm right in there with you now. Coach, what do you got for our guests before we wrap this show up?
Absolutely. And everybody, join the DD Discord. I'm exhibit A of somebody who's in there. Heisman tier, love it. I always put it this way. If you're the smartest person in the room, then you should leave. And I personally never want to leave or feel like leaving DD Fantasy Football. So great content. And the game day chat just hits so well every time. Sundays rolling around. You get plenty of, Scott's out there just in real time. That's a touchdown. His foot's in or his foot's out. Get in the community. I got to tell you. Speaking of purgatory, it just makes me think of Peter Griffin. He's like, hey, not so good, not so bad. Let's talk about a player who is amazing. There's no purgatory with Travis Hunter. And I just got to let you guys know, I'm so glad we got the discourse from running back and weaved into the quarterbacks, because I felt really bad. I was looking at my question. I'm like, this is not a running back question because I was not paying attention when I wrote it. Scott, how are you handling Travis Hunter in rookie drafts? And this is something I think is important. We should be getting each analyst's spin on it because it's going to mold so much of what we have going on. What's your prediction, Scott, for Travis Hunter as it relates to fantasy football? What will your portfolio approach be to drafting Travis Hunter? And then maybe, can you give us part of how you will handle the psychological element versus your leagues?
Yeah, man, this has been a fun topic all offseason, hasn't it? Just wrapping your head around, like, because there's, if you like game theory, like this individual player and situation is like the quintessential moment, I think, of we may never see another player like this that comes in and there's this fierce debate as to what he's going to do. I'm under the impression that for now, we're not going to get any clarity other than reading between the lines from what teams say, how GMs or coaches kind of hint at why they made the pick of Travis Hunter. We can maybe take some of the landing spots where maybe someone has said something about him, about how they view him. And if that team takes him, maybe you have a little more conviction in the bet that you make. But I'm assuming that when I'm making my rookie picks, I'm not going to know for sure what's going to happen. So this thought of, he's going to be announced as a receiver, and I know exactly how he's going to be used in middle of May when I make my rookie picks, like that's not going to happen. I think we're all just, the universe is going to deliver us ambiguity when you're going to have to make decisions on Travis Hunter. So my mind just goes to right now, your league.
Yep.
You know how many starters, how many roster spots, the pulse of the market, all of those things. I could ask each one of you to pick a random league, and you could tell me what's the tier of rookie pick in that draft, just based on what you could trade it for, how the league market's going to view each one of these positions. What's the pick you would be willing to completely flush down the toilet and just take the biggest swing possible? And that's probably where you should draft Travis Hunter.
What's that number? Do you think? Okay, I'll throw out a number and try and think a little bit broadly, like law of large numbers. Let's say you're in 30 leagues as a general practice. Let's scale hot potato, right? Getting warmer. 105 super flex tight end premium. Is that too hot, or you're willing to burn the 105?
I don't think it's too much, but I also think the return based on how this class is going to be viewed is probably a pick that I'd rather do something else with it. I think the risk reward is fine, but I think just given this running back class, if we assume there's going to be a quarterback like Ward that goes 101, and I'll hedge my bets and say there's going to be 4 running backs that people are just going to go, holy shit, I have to get that guy. And then there's going to be 1 wide receiver. I don't know who it is, Burden, Golden, Tet, whatever.
Trey.
You're right there with...
Talk about it, bigz.
I'd say 7 picks. Maybe there's a tight end, depending on the premium.
Or 108.
I think it's right in that range where if you have picks there and... you've tried to move it, you've tried to package, you've tried to do all these other things that give you a little more ROI on the pick, I think that's probably right in that 107 to 109 range. And if somebody wants to take him higher, if you want to take him over the RB3 or the QB1, you know what I mean? Like that's a swing that I'm okay someone else taking over me. But but some of these mocks, like Coach, we've done mocks on DD and like he goes at the 204. You know what I mean? It's like that's not realistic. Somebody is going to go screw it. It's 110. I don't care. If he's a defensive back, I'll live with the 0. You know what I mean?
My home league is an IDP league. I have the 101. I'm taking Travis Hunter.
Oh yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I mean, for me, like I'm gonna, especially in that range, unless we get a third running back with first round draft capital, I'm gonna maybe willing to take a swing over Henderson potentially if he doesn't get that round 1 capital that some people are projecting right now. I mean, he's got the skills that he could be the most elite out of this whole group at wide receiver. And, if he gets a spot where they're going to play him there, we'll know a little bit more after the draft, obviously, and where he lands and what the plans are for him with the team. And if he's in a position where, that could be the direction they use him in, I'm all for it. I'll risk it at that stage, I think, for the upside. All right. Well, that was a great show, everybody. Killer content, Scott, man. That was awesome. You had us all in awe for a good chunk of that show and really made us think about how we reassess our dynasty rosters, how to think about game theory in general. Really have to reassess this show and listen to it a couple times because some great content here. Scott, why don't you tell everybody what you're doing and what you're working on right now?
Yeah, appreciate you guys having me. It's a good discussion to be able to talk about just free flow some of these ideas because I don't have them all scripted out. You know what I mean? Like just getting to converse with other people that, can kind of understand, some of the nuances of this stuff. But ddfantasyfootball.com. There's a great community in there. If you like some of the content that you're talking about, like this is what I like to talk about. Like this is what my brain is doing all day. So I'm usually just hanging out. Coach is in there a lot of times. We're just talking through. People will ask questions, and sometimes I don't even answer the direct question. I'll start going on tangents with some of this stuff, and then people will go, I wish we would have recorded that, turned it into something that people can listen to. So ddfantasyfootball.com. We're developing tools and things that can help you think this way. Because that's been the tough part is when you have to say it all and you can't show it, it's sometimes difficult to get a lot of people on board with it. Because some of these abstract things are hard to grasp when you're just listening to it on a podcast. So check out the site. There's promo codes in all of our videos. Once you're in there, you'll be able to talk to me and interact with myself and Ray. We're just hanging out in there most of the day. So that's where you can find me.
Wow.
Got to meet Ray for the first time at the Senior Bowl. It was pretty good moment in my life. I was very, very happy about it. All right, everybody, that's going to be the show for this week. Thank you all for watching. Thank you, Scott, for coming on. Find him at Charles Chill FFB. Go ahead and sign up for the Scott Fish Bowl, scottfishbowl.com. Go to Live Event NorCal if you are going to be in the Northern California area on June 21st. And also, we were brought to you by, producer. We need a producer. Rolling Smoke in the 907. Call 907-723-5034 or find Rolling Smoke in the 907 on Facebook and get yourself some smoked habanero pickles. Schultze, hopefully he hasn't been sirened away by the Cape Fear mermaids, and he will be back with us next week. But other than that, we hope you win.
You forgot to do the read on mesothelioma in the class action suit.
You may be eligible.